Today, I am thrilled to chat with Kate Gilbert, who, after a decade of leading a successful magazine, discovered her true calling in empowering women entrepreneurs to achieve their dreams without letting work consume their lives. After founding and running a magazine for 10 years, Kate realized her passion was helping other women and not taking over their entire lives with trying to hit those goals. In her actual 30-day sprint program, clients get out of their social media rut with mindset, targeted messaging, and organizational systems so that they can reach their ideal clients and build momentum toward big goals. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course. I think it was almost serendipitous that we connected because I always talk about doing Pinterest without tantrums over tech or
Mhm.
trading their sleep for success, because that is a huge thing as entrepreneurs, like making sure you have boundaries set and things like that. So
Yeah, definitely.
I'd love to hear your take on this and see like what are some of the biggest things that put us in a social media rut and like kind of get us to that point of where we're realizing we may not be setting those goals or those boundaries to standard of what we should be.
I think boundaries is really a key word where if you are letting your personal and your work social media time collide, then it can get very tiring. And also, I think a lot of people get burnt out because they have hopes and expectations of, oh, I worked really hard on this reel or this post or this pin or whatever, and I think it's going to do really well, and then it's crickets. And then the cycle of being disappointed regularly or not quite reaching the goals you have for social media, after a while, that can be really a bummer. And, it happens to me too. So,
Yeah, for sure. Me too, right?
yeah.
I think it's natural as humans for it to happen to anybody. I'm wondering if you have specific like blocks that you can talk about that maybe are holding people back when we're talking about like mindset and social media, and when they're considering, going through a launch or even just growing their business online. What are some of those biggest things that people need to think about
Mhm.
when hitting this unrealistic or unhealthy type of expectation?
Well, I think, first of all, anything you can do in advance really helps where, that way you're not stressing about your launch while you're trying to create content. So if your content is made ahead of time, or if you're able to reuse content from the previous time or repurpose it, then that will make everything feel so much better, because then you can just concentrate on what you're doing and go in and engage and all that stuff, and not be, trying to lay down the train tracks while you're on the front of the train that's going down the
Yeah,
road.
yeah,
So I
for
think that's
sure.
a big help. But I mean, I also think that we have to learn to just shut it down. The minute you have that icky feeling, unless you have something you absolutely really have to get done, just close the app, just leave, step away from it. And we need to start paying attention to like who gives us those icky feelings.
Yeah,
Because I mean, this is a conversation I have a lot with my teenager. It's like, what are you looking at? How is it affecting you? Who is affecting you? Because, even as adults, uh, there's definitely an effect that seeing other people's stuff has on me all the time. And I need to, well, one of the best pieces of advice I got when I started my magazine was an editor of another magazine said to me, keep your nose down, do the work, and move on.
yeah,
And she said, if you look at what everyone else is doing, you're going to make yourself nuts. So I try to be very careful about who I follow within my own industry, because some people they're just going to like trigger me. They're
Yeah.
just going to immediately make me feel like, oh, I'm not doing great. I'm not doing as well as them. They're doing it better. But the other thing we have to keep in mind is we don't actually know, because it is possible to have millions of followers and not be selling things. It is possible to have an empty
Yeah.
calendar with millions of followers. And it's possible, like me, to have a very full calendar with, I don't know, 1,200. I don't know how many Instagram followers I have, for example, but it's not the biggest account in the world, but
Yep.
I have a very full calendar because the people who follow me love me. So
100%. Yeah. And so like that was going to be one of my questions too, is when we're already there, right? Like, so maybe we talk to our kids and we're trying to teach them, right? Like, I talk to my teenager about stuff like that all the time. We're very careful about what we allow because we want them to be able to learn those healthy boundaries.
yeah,
But what if the entrepreneur is already in it, right? So,
yeah,
what if the entrepreneur or business owner is like, I already follow these people. Like I already know that they're in my sphere, right?
mhm,
Because I also believe that there's really no competition. It's always
yes,
collaboration.
yes, thank
So
you.
how do you stop comparing yourself to another entrepreneur in your niche, knowing that it's unhealthy, knowing that it's unrealistic because you don't know what vanity metrics they have,
Yeah.
right? While still allowing yourself to have that collaboration side to it as well.
Well, I mean, I try to pay the most attention to the people who actually collaborate with me, who the people who I feel very supported by, and I support them and we co-work together. And some of them are much more successful than I am.
Yeah.
But you know, and it's fine. So instead I look at them for inspiration, and then people who are more parallel to me, doing similar things at about the same level as me, we try to support each other in terms of like, how can we do better? How can we help each other? What can we do? So I'm 100% for collaboration, but I do have a phrase that I want to give you that I got from a friend of mine who's a life coach. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but I told her some situation and she said to me, "What are you making this mean?" And I was like, oh. And so
Yeah.
I say that to myself when I start to get like bad feelings on social media, like, jealousy. It happens. Like you see someone else who's like killing it, or you think they're killing it, and then you're like, why can't that be me? Like, why did their post is dumb? Why did it go viral? Mine didn't,
Yeah.
like, so I try to ask myself, what are you making this mean? Because people tend to go down the path of, I'm not doing as well as I want, therefore I'm not doing good at all. And those people are doing better.
Yeah.
And therefore, why am I even doing this? And I should just quit. Like you can really go
Yeah.
down that path. And so, what are you making this mean? Like, allows me to stop immediately and really think about, like, okay, that person is doing really well. It actually means nothing about me. Like, has
Yeah.
nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. And
Yeah. And
yeah.
so that's really cool because I think that's something that I can start incorporating too. What I teach on Pinterest is something called pin hacking, right? And you
Hmm.
have to look at your competitors
Hmm.
in that space. And we say competitors loosely,
Yeah,
right? Because with Pinterest and it being search based, you have to look at who's showing up for those
for sure.
keywords.
Yeah.
But looking at what does this mean? Like, what am I doing? And having that driven purpose for that,
Hmm.
I think will help keep you from going down that unrealistic expectation there as well, right? Because we see the vanity metrics right on Pinterest. And so I think that's really, really useful information to
Well,
just keep in mind when going down that strategy.
I also actually, so I give a workshop called social media group therapy. And one of the things I actually make people do is say this phrase out loud to me. I say, your vanity metrics do not equal your success as a business nor your worth as a person or something like that. I can't remember exactly how I say
Yeah.
it, but it like your vanity metrics do not equal your potential success, like your
Yeah.
current metrics, and they don't equal what you are as a person either.
Yeah.
So,
And on my coaching calls, I do the same thing for Pinterest because everybody comes and they're like, I have this million monthly followers. I have this many views. And it's like the phrase I say is vanity metrics don't equal dollars in your bank account. Like you
exactly.
deposit
Hmm.
vanity metrics.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, my landlord doesn't take like.
yeah, right. Oh man, if they did. So, okay, so we talked about vanity metrics and we talked about like comparison. Can you touch on like overthinking things and like the perfectionism that you may see, which we were actually talking before we came on here, right? Like I may look like I have this perfect pink background,
Yeah.
but if I tilted my camera to the right or to the left, it's realistic, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes, again, with social media, you overthink like, oh my gosh, I have to have this specific camera to do this specific video, or I have to have, this written out perfectly before I put it as a social post. Like, how do we overcome some of those common mindset blocks of perfectionism as well?
Right. So when we're looking at other people, we have to remember that, like you said, what you see in the frame could look perfect, but I could have a pile of trash here at my feet. I don't, but I could,
Yeah.
you know, like you never really know. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know what somebody's life is actually like. It could be that when they turn the camera away from their perfect kitchen, there's like dishes piled everywhere. So I try to keep that in mind. We can't believe really anything we see. I do want to give a little footnote to that and say that, more and more authenticity really is mattering online. People are sick of perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we especially see this, of course, with TikTok. TikTok is really pushing this. Like overproduced videos that are perfect do not do well on TikTok. So
And
we
with Pinterest, when you're repurposing any of your video content to Pinterest, it's not doing well unless there's an intended purpose, like you
yeah.
said. Like they don't care about the messy.
Yeah, totally. So we have to think of that when we're looking at other people. And then when we're looking at our own stuff, I, so I'm going to say something that could sound depressing, but I think it's actually a good thing. And we have to look at it in a good way. So I try to remember that social media posts, for the most part, are perishable, and every post does not have to be a 7-course meal. Every post is also not going to last forever. Like you'll do a post that is a granola bar, you'll do a post that is like a Reese's peanut butter cup, you'll do a post that is maybe like a roast chicken. But, we don't have to make everything huge and everything perfect. And we have to remember that, especially in terms of social media platforms such as like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, very quickly that content is out of date, more or less. Yes, people will see it if they go to your profile, and that's great. But I try to just like let go of it. And I've got to tell you, like, for my emails I send, I sit down, I write them, I send them. Like I do not, there's no obsessing going on. It's very off the cuff. I mean, and I guess I'm lucky that doing that is something that comes easy for me. And I feel like fine, I'm just being my authentic self. I'm writing a note to a friend,
Yeah,
and oh, well, many of my clients were friends first, and some
exactly.
have become friends. So I feel like I am. So that's what I do. So I just try to keep in mind it doesn't have to be perfect. The people who like me are going to like it anyway. I sent out an email the other day that I was like, oh, that was okay. It was fine. I got back like 3 messages like, oh my God, that was such a good email. And I was
Yeah,
like, oh, all right, well, cool. like, you
yeah.
know, so I just try to not obsess too much and move on.
Yeah, and I think that's so great to note is like we are human, right?
Mhm.
And so even if there's a spelling error, like there's a friend of mine who calls them her Jenna-isms
Nice.
because they know like she is not the best speller, but the amazing support and strategy that she provides trumps spelling a word wrong. Like it really does not matter.
Yeah, one of my clients is a vegan kitchen coach, and she's all about like sustainability and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But she did a post that was like, I screwed up. Here are all the vegetables that went bad this week that I didn't get around to using, and showed her putting them into the compost. That
Mm,
post blew up. I think last I looked, the numbers were like twice as good as any of her other posts. And
amazing.
I think it brought her a lot of people because they're like, oh, she's real. Like, she's
Yeah.
not judgy. She's not the judgy, vegan kitchen coach. She's
Yeah.
the, look, I messed up. We all mess up sometimes, whatever. Like, I'll
This is
try to do better next week.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's amazing. Speaking about like looking at other people's posts and like trying to relate to them and find your community and that authenticity. Do you feel like sometimes when we go onto social media that it can actually stunt your creativity? And if so, like how would we make sure that we're not going down that path when we're trying to still be ourselves?
I think I always tell my clients to approach everything they do, but especially social media, with like the spirit of like a scientist. Like, you're doing a science experiment. If you can look at other people's work and say, oh, that's interesting. All right, now, how that's an interesting message and that resonates with me, and I think it would resonate with my audience. How could I do something similar? Obviously, you're not going to rip anybody off, but like, how could I use that as inspiration? Or, oh, I like that trending sound. How can I do that for me? As long as and then look also at your results and say, like, oh, that's interesting. This post didn't do so great. I wonder why. I wonder if it's the time of day I put it up. I wonder if I didn't use the right words. Maybe the graphic isn't working.
Yep.
If you can look at everything in with a sense of curiosity and also like the intention to play, and like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Like, it's a game, but you're only competing against yourself. If you can do those things, then I feel like it's very possible to be on social media and not feel bad about it, and
Yeah.
not get those icky feelings. Um, Everybody has their off days. I mean, that's my kind of spirit all the time when I look at social media. And there are still days when I'm like, and I just close it
Yep.
because, that girl I went to college with seems to have a perfect life and I'm sick of seeing it. Of course
Mhm.
that's going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
for
yeah,
sure. Yeah, I love that so much. Again, going back to like the pin hacking thing, right? Like we don't steal, we don't
right.
copy, but your audience and your content can fill a gap that maybe somebody else isn't. And
Right.
so,
And sometimes I see somebody post something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely disagree with that. Or I see how they could have done that a lot better. And guess what?
yeah,
I'm going to do it.
yeah,
So,
exactly. And
yeah.
I think that brings out the authenticity from our sides as well, right? Like
Mhm.
I know there are a ton of people right now on social media talking about becoming a Amazon influencer by only using Pinterest links. And
Mhm.
like it's so much more than that. And so for me to see that and use that as creativity, like
Mhm.
you're saying, rather than like getting stunted or concerned or things like that, I think I have not yet talked about it. So that may
I
be
mean,
something I start
I
doing now instead of
I would talk about it,
yeah.
and I mean, as soon as I see people saying like, oh, entrepreneurship's like so easy and so fun, and you can make like six figures in like 2 weeks, I'm like, no, shut up,
Yeah.
like,
It is not a quick
Yeah.
get rich scheme that we're playing
No.
over here.
No. I mean, honestly, for me, as soon as I hear somebody talking like money numbers, then that's an automatic skepticism I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so I know that we've kind of covered like a different couple of like mindset blocks and like how to be able to kind of overcome them and things like that. Are
Mhm.
there specific like tools or things that we haven't covered besides just closing it and walking away to be able to like protect ourselves or maybe our time invested in things so we don't have tantrums over tech or trading sleep for success?
For sure. One of my favorite tips is like so low tech, you're going to laugh at me, but I'm going to show you. So when I have something to do, I write it on a post-it note and then I stick the post-it note to the top of my phone
I love it.
and I just say like, okay, I'm going to do that thing. Cause I mean, I don't know who else is in the ADHD club with me. Like I'm not formally diagnosed, but
Yeah.
like I even on networks that I don't love, I fall down the rabbit hole so quickly and so quickly just forget what I was doing. So I just like put a little note to myself, like post this thing and then close it. And this is sitting here. So that's what I
Up
do.
every time you pick up your phone.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. I also use app limits
Oh,
so I don't scroll a lot. I try to separate my work and my personal accounts so that I can scroll for fun one place without it weighing on me in a work way. And or sometimes I separate platforms entirely. Like I used to use Twitter. I'm not on there anymore, but I used to use Twitter
mm.
for personal. I had a private account that was all I did on Twitter. And like everything else was kind of work stuff. And now TikTok's like my TikTok and Pinterest are my personal things. And, yeah, I've been using Pinterest for so long. Oh my gosh. Like,
I know. Me too.
yeah.
I started my agency and my business and doing Pinterest work with people when Pinterest was invite only.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't remember if I got in when it was invite only, but I've been on there a very long time.
Yep.
So, and I realized recently, I was like, oh, it's connected to an email I don't have access to anymore. How's that going to work? Anyway,
Message
uh,
me after. I'll help you.
okay, cool. So, I mean, the other tools I use to make things less stressful and have fewer tantrums is I sometimes designate part of the day is my focused social media time so that it doesn't just like bleed into the entire day. I do not have notifications on my telephone for any social media
Huh?
because even if it's like seriously, what emergency is going to happen? like like you know
Yeah.
so I check in every so often, but I have them in the scheduled summaries. Like on iPhones, you can have the scheduled summary, and I have those at like 8 a.m., noon, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. I also never do work social media after a certain point at night because God forbid it's the one time somebody says something really nasty to you, it's going to ruin your sleep, right?
Uh,
So I'm really strict with my work social media usage after like 8 o'clock at night for me.
yeah.
Um, and I stay up quite late so that I still have a lot of time after that
Yeah.
and to think about it. Also, like schedulers. I'm sure that you talk
Yeah.
with people about schedulers.
Yep.
So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. My favorite is Tailwind.
Yeah. And I mean, and in my program also like we make a content loop. So we do a lot of work in advance and it's repurposing. So all of that stuff is really like a time saver and we make sure like we're communicating as efficiently as possible, that we have a plan, that we can keep going through this plan, and then we have a system to create and reuse content. So,
Yeah. I love it.
yeah.
So, talking about all the tech
Yeah.
and talking about all the tools, I
Yeah.
know I've heard you say it before, but what is the Candy Crush rule?
Okay. So, have you ever played Candy Crush?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So even if you haven't played Candy Crush, like people have played solitaire, right? Like even a pack of cards. If you lost a level on Candy Crush, would you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a terrible human. Like I'm a piece of crap"?
No.
Exactly, because Candy Crush is an algorithm too, right? So sometimes it lets you
Love
win.
it.
Sometimes it makes you lose. Sometimes it forces you to pay to win. Sometimes like if you take a break and you come back, they make it real easy or they make it real hard. It's an experiment. It's an algorithm, just like social media is. So we can't take our results on social media personally like that.
I love that analogy so much because you don't think, I mean, everybody talks about algorithms on social media and algorithms for this and that.
Yeah.
But when do you ever hear anybody complain about the game algorithm?
Yeah.
Like ever.
Seriously. No, I mean, it's all built to keep you hooked. It's all
Yeah.
built to keep you trying. So we have to approach it like with a sense of play, with a sense of curiosity, and and the whole what are you making this mean thing. So if we
Yeah.
start to make it mean too much about ourselves, then we can be like, oh, whoa, 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 hold on a second here. Like, it's just a game. It's okay. I'm just
Yeah.
competing against myself.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. That
Yeah.
was so amazing. I thank you so much for hanging out with us
Thank you
and
for having me.
different ways. Yeah. Where can we find more about you, connect with you if someone's needing some more help or support in that regard? Because I'm sure this is a huge thing for a lot of people right now. So,
You can find me at kategilbert.com. So that's Kate with a K. And actually, on my site, I have a really juicy freebie for anybody who would like it. It is called a content creation roadmap, and it takes you from planning your content to posting it to reusing it. And yeah, it's pretty juicy. So if
amazing.
that sounds useful to anybody, it'll just help you make things more efficiently.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.